everyone, good afternoon. Welcome to our UK Buy to Let webinar organized by Juwai.AsiaHK in collaborations with Sovereign Group. I'm Mandy Chan, your host of today. Just a little bit background of our company. As you can see some of the videos that we did share just now. We are officially launched in May 2020. Not only provide buyers with full range of high quality listings in popular home buying area, but also present extensive professional reports, expert advice, and market updates to help buyers from all over the world develop appropriate investment strategy and global investment opportunities. Juwai.Asia is operated and managed by Juwai.IQI, a merger of two agents real estate super brand IQI Global and Juwai.com, aiming to empower agents to be global residents. Before we start the webinar, just a gentle reminder, please mute your mic during the presentations. If you have any questions, feel free to comment in the comment box, or you can join our Q&A sections towards the end of presentations. For those watching on Facebook Live, you can leave your comment in the message box and we will answer it later. Without further delay, let me introduce the speakers of today. Sovereign have a wide range of service ranging from corporate and tax planning to asset management, legal advice, and retirement planning. The company has been established since 1987 and has grown into one of the largest independent corporate and trust service provider in the world. Currently, the company manages over 20,000 clients that include companies, entrepreneurs, private investors, or high net worth individuals and their families, and have assets under administration in excess of USD 10 billion. With a network of office and agents in all major international finance centers. In fact, this was the second webinar we did with Sovereign Group and the first webinar on UK tax planning, which is for on February 20th. For those who missed it, you can go to our YouTube, Facebook channel, or watch the replay or speak to our consultants. They can send the link to you. Anyway, it's our great honor to have the three speakers again to join us to share their knowledge and experience in UK buy to let. Firstly, we have Simon London, Managing Director of Sovereign Trust Limited based in UK. Simon has 30 years experience and expertise in international private client tax planning, trustee, corporate service, pension trustee, and the market entry industry. He's currently the Vice President of the Lawyers Society of Fellows. He's a member of the Institute of Management and is the founder and the chairman of the International Professional Association Limited. Then we have second speaker, Stuart, Director of Sovereign Corporate and Trustee Service Limited, also based in UK. Stuart has worked in trust and fiduciary business industry for over 20 years, and he's also a member of staff, and his experience enables him to work closely with clients and advise the best company and trust solutions for his clients, be they private or corporate. Last but not least, we have Winnie Check, Client Relationship Managers based in Hong Kong. Winnie joined Sovereign Trust Hong Kong in 2016. She has 10 years experience in corporate and trust service. She will do a brief summary on UK buy to let in Cantonese later. Without further ado, let's welcome Simon.
Thank you, Mandy. And first slide, my first slide, please, if you don't mind. And very good morning. Very good morning, everybody. Hope this works. And I will start by mentioning, there we go, that Winnie is very much part of our headquarters based in Hong Kong, and we've been in Hong Kong for over 30 years. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the subject matter which we're going to cover today. The current landscape, especially for overseas nationals, in particular Hong Kong nationals, but it applies to all overseas nationals, a very special new immigration option that has just arrived, which is specifically relevant to Hong Kong citizens, and two illustrations focusing on today's talk: buy-to-let residential property investment made as a private landlord, a corporate landlord using a UK company and the advantages of that, and when to use an overseas company with what we call a trust or pension wrapper to make sure one navigates away from UK inheritance tax consequences. After all, ladies and gentlemen, the property is located, or your property investment will be located in the UK. So you have the consequences of UK taxation, and in particular UK inheritance taxation, to be somewhat alarmed about, but we'll tell you the positives in how to work around, navigate around, and plan for your inward UK property investment. Interesting year we've just had, and it has been obviously for the world an unforgettable one, but clearly the UK has had its higher ever demand on record for buy-to-let investments, with over 2.7 million landlords that have invested in buy-to-let residential property. Currently, the average property price throughout the United Kingdom is £157,000, and buy-to-let lending, despite COVID and despite the dreaded pandemic, notwithstanding that 34 million UK residents have been successfully vaccinated, the buy-to-let lending in the last 12 months was a record £36 billion. So clearly this is a relevant, hot subject. Anyway, we go to this slide here, which will canter you through the UK taxation update. It's not a tax seminar, but we set out some grounded observations of taxation and how that particularly is relevant to non-UK domiciled persons, as opposed to Stuart and I, who are UK domiciled persons. A quick walk through the new visa for Hong Kong citizens that became effective in January 2021, just a couple of months ago, and why that is even better than the rights of residence opportunity that was enjoyed by EU nationals up until December last year, and just before the UK decided to, well, the UK quitted and left the EU. So Hong Kong citizens have some very useful opportunities to relocate to the UK without too much fuss and difficulty. Two illustrations to finish. How to purchase property, yes, in a personal name, a UK, not a UK personal name, but a personal name, an individual landlord sort of status. More importantly, a UK corporate illustration using a company to purchase property, and when to use an overseas company, and something relevant for your international and UK tax planning needs. Next slide, Mandy, although the screen is flashing a bit my end. Next slide. Right, just staying on, this is just one slide on non-property specific situations, and there can be hours of seminars about the applicability of our tax system, especially the benefits of the non-UK domiciled or non-dom regime. Technically, ladies and gentlemen, there are two tax systems in the UK. One, unfortunately for you, Stuart and I, where we are taxed on our worldwide income, our worldwide gains, and when, unfortunately, we are no longer here and we have departed, that means we are, unfortunately, suffered an untimely demise. Our global assets are subject to inheritance tax, which is pretty dreadful because the tax rate is 40%. So quite often, a child or survivor would have to sell an asset in order to settle and pay the UK inheritance tax. For non-UK domiciled persons, they are not exposed to income tax on overseas revenue. They're not exposed to capital gains tax on overseas gains, and they're not exposed to inheritance tax on rest of world assets. And that is forever if they don't come to live here. And that is up to 15 years if they do decide to come and live here. That is because they are non-domiciled of the UK. You can have one domicile, you can have a number of citizenships, but you can only have one domicile for UK tax purposes, but you can be resident in a number of countries. You can be resident of Hong Kong and also resident of the UK. So the tax planning through sovereign is pretty key to your undertake your investment objectives. But domicile, ladies and gentlemen, just a quick one, is based on your country of birth, where your permanent home has been, where your parents were born. And if that's adding up a little bit now, it's pretty much certain where your domicile is, where you have sustained till now substantial social and economic ties, where you've had an education, and where you intend to go back to, and where you have substantial ties. So if that's Malaysia for Mandy, that's Hong Kong for Winnie, and unfortunately the UK for Stuart, then that is your domicile and your domicile of origin. So that would mean that the investors today, or the people in the room, are likely to be non-UK domiciled, and the advantage of being non-domiciled or non-UK domiciled are clearly featured. And I have already mentioned the benefits of that. Any questions on this, off or online, please contact Winnie, Stuart, or myself. Stuart and myself are based in England, Winnie, of course, in Hong Kong. Next slide, please. Just the next slide is on the new UK immigration, when we get to that slide. Thank you. So the UK Home Office, the Ministry of Immigration in the UK, opened a very exciting visa to attract Hong Kong citizens in view of the British and Hong Kong synergy, partnership and relationship that we've enjoyed for centuries, availing to British national overseas citizens, Hong Kong citizens, the right to come to England, the UK, the right to relocate, the right to invest, the right to live, work, reside, and retire. And I think this status is as good, if not better, than the settlement status that was afforded to EU nationals prior to the 31st of December. So Hong Kong citizens, effective now, effective January, thanks to our Prime Minister, has made the opportunity for Hong Kong citizens that can apply inside or outside of the UK. So an immigration application, if Winnie was here in the UK, either on holiday, studying, or on a particular visa, she could apply for this special British national overseas visa. The application, once made, enables her to, or the person to, be here for 30 months, extendable by 30 months, or a single period of 5 years. And after 5 years, you get that famous status of indefinite leave to remain. And as long as you come here as long as you come here for a minimum period after acquiring indefinite leave to remain, you'll always enjoy that permanent rights of residence. You are, during the period of which you're a resident, and during the period where a visa is offered to you, you're able to work and study, but not able to access public funds such as welfare benefits until you obtain indefinite leave to remain. And after 5 years, again, after 5 years of successful residence of the UK, you have the same rights as Stuart and I do to all of the benefits. And after 6 years, or within 6 years, subject to residency criteria, you could apply and obtain a passport. So this visa is very much open to all types, kinds, family, friends, students, workers, and people that just physically wish to relocate. So you're all extremely welcome, which is another gateway to investing in UK property.
And just to follow on that point, Tom, I think to make it very clear how welcoming the British government, or the British as a whole, are in regards to the B&A passport holders, they have actually opened up hubs around the UK, both virtually and physical, so you'll come into the UK, even if it's non-property, to assist you when you're here. So the welcome mat is well and truly out from us Brits.
Great point. Very good point. And after a 5-year stay, yes, you can leave the UK. That's one question. But I would make sure you get your indefinite leave to remain permanent status. And as long as you come back for a minimum period, which is normally a couple of days every couple of years, or a couple of days I would each year, then you will still enjoy that ILR status. You might not get a passport because you may not be living here for the right amount of, or the right quantity of days, but that ILR stays with you as long as you have some connection with the UK and you come back for a couple of days, hopefully more. Next slide, please. Onto property, ladies and gentlemen. This is the observations I want to make in terms of addressing the once only purchase taxation, better known as stamp duty land tax. This is applicable to an individual purchaser, an individual landlord, a corporate landlord, or even an overseas corporate landlord. Graduated rates of stamp duty will apply, quite low to start with, and then quite high when we get above £925,000. That's the graduated rates. Mandy will be sending this presentation to everyone that is registered to attend. So I'm not going to, it's not my style to talk word for word of what's been written, but there is a stamp duty holiday due to COVID and due to the government wanting to restart the economy or let the economy emerge from this dreadful crisis that the world has been in. And the property industry is a good barometer for an economic recovery, and supported obviously with some stamp duty relaxation. So up to 30th of June, stamp duty will be zero on purchases less than 500,000. And that stamp duty relaxation extends up to September, but reducing to £250,000 for a property purchase and no stamp duty. You've got some surcharges, which I've mentioned, the bullet point before last, but they are once only charges. And anybody interested in UK commercial property, that's a property you cannot live in, or a property that you cannot let to a person to live in. It would be a warehouse, an office block, a hotel, and that was covered in our first webinar, supported and promoted by Juwai.AsiaHK and Sovereign, and the stamp duty for that is at 5%. Mandy's got a recording of that seminar where Juwai introduced and presented, and Stuart, Winnie and myself delivered, and that's on commercial property. And that webinar also covered how to purchase a main residence and lifestyle asset. So take a look at that. I think it's on YouTube, Facebook, but Mandy has the recording. Next slide, please. We're moving on to the applicable, applicable taxation. This is a reference slide, ladies and gentlemen. Basically, don't buy a property in a company unless, ladies and gentlemen, it is a buy-to-let residential property. If it's for your own use and it's for a main residence, a trophy purchase, or a lifestyle, buy it in your own names. If it's a lot more than £1 million, buy it in a trust. Because if you buy a property in a company and the property is not rented exclusively or made available to rent exclusively, you've got this dreaded annual tax charge, which is easily avoided if the property is made available for exclusive rental and not for friends, family, and close connected parties occupation. So don't use a company for a property that's going to have mixed use, personal enjoyment, and/or a bit of rental combined. Capital gains tax was introduced to non-residents, ladies and gentlemen, in 2015. So if a Hong Kong citizen, for example, purchased a property in year 2000, then they understand that capital gains tax was introduced in 2015, and then they sell it next year, post-COVID, then it's not capital gains tax from the purchase price through to what you sell it for. You take the property value at April 2015 from the sales price when you sell, and then you pay 28% capital gains tax. So you rebase it to 2015. Inheritance tax will never go away. It applies to individuals that purchase property in their own names, and it applies to Hong Kong and offshore and UK companies that are owned by physical persons. The tax rate is 40% come the demise, or if you are buying in husband and wife, same-sex couples, civil partnerships, then the inheritance tax is visited on the last surviving spouse or partner dying. The tax rate is 40%, which is pretty dreadful. It's the worst tax in the world, but it is very easy to navigate around this. If you are a private landlord, then and you're married or in a civil partnership, buy in joint names, because inheritance tax doesn't apply on the first death. Buy with a mortgage. There was a record-breaking 36 billion of mortgage finance that was lent in the last year, and there is no problem to get mortgage finance for a person or a company that is owned by non-residents of the UK and non-domiciled persons of the UK. I would make sure there's a will in place if there's personal landlords investing in property, which is something we can arrange. And to completely navigate away from inheritance tax is to purchase term life insurance. Not a positive subject in terms of moving away from inheritance tax, but inheritance tax is 40%, even though the purchaser, the private landlord, may be a Hong Kong citizen, Hong Kong resident, a person like Mandy who's Malaysian domiciled and resident. Inheritance tax applies because the property is located in the UK, ladies and gentlemen. So private landlords, buy in joint names if you can, mortgage finance, make a will, and look at life insurance, because term life insurance can be taken out to cover the worst inheritance tax consequence charge, and it need not be that expensive. Okay, next slide. What to use when to buy a property, ladies and gentlemen. On the personal side, private landlords, again, joint names if you can, will, mortgage, life insurance, but if we do have mortgage finance in a personal name, mortgage interest at 20%, that's 20% of the mortgage interest amount, can only be deducted from mortgage finance. So corporate landlord purchases is certainly more popular than a private landlord purchase. A UK company is arguably a little less expensive to administer. The Hong Kong person can be the director and the shareholder, because a UK company can be administered by a minimum of one person as a director, and a minimum of one shareholder. So there's no requirement for a UK company to have local directors. Dividends paid to non-residents are not subject to tax. The UK, like Hong Kong, doesn't have a dividend withholding tax, so dividends and liquidation proceeds should not be subject to tax. Currently, the corporation tax rate, couple of points higher than Hong Kong. It's still at 19% and still the lowest in the G7 macro nations. IHT at 40% will still apply though. So if Winnie and Simon or Winnie and Stuart are the shareholders, unfortunately, inheritance tax does apply. The other option, ladies and gentlemen, is to look at an overseas company buying a residential buy-to-let property portfolio, especially if the value of the property or the purchase price to start with is a little higher than the basic, and there's some mortgage finance, and possibly there's going to be an increase or more than one property being purchased, and you're going to add to that portfolio over time, and therefore an overseas company purchasing property can still obtain mortgage finance. a company, whether it's a UK or overseas company, you're going to get full deductibility of mortgage interest from gross rental earnings. The corporation tax is still going to be 19% after all deductions. And if the overseas company is owned by a trust or a pension scheme, then the IHT, UK inheritance tax, will simply not apply. So let's move to the next slide. And I would say to one question that buying a property through a corporate is a little better, especially if there's mortgage finance, because you can get all of the mortgage finance deducted, whereas an individual can only deduct 20% from gross rental income. Anyway, illustration 1, corporate landlord. This is the least expensive and the least expensive, and the threshold for a purchase does not have to be so high. Here we have typically at the top, could be 2 spouses, could be a civil partnership as well. It could be anybody, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be 2 spouses. It could be 1 or more persons that decide to set up a UK company, because the UK company doesn't need any local ownership, doesn't need any local directors. The individuals, whether they're in Hong Kong or elsewhere, set up the UK company, possibly through sovereign. They introduce a property deposit into the UK company or the full purchase price. Mortgage finance, lawyers and all the purchasing process is assisted by Juwai and Sovereign. The real estate is sourced. The real estate is a decision to buy the real estate is taken after research and due diligence has been undertaken, with optional mortgage finance there, ladies and gentlemen. And the buy-to-let residential real estate is purchased by the UK company and then made ready for a rental income. So to gaining the advantages in the left-hand slide of that illustration, this presentation is going to be sent to you all. There's no UK tax upon contributing loan and share capital into the UK company. There's no tax on acquiring a mortgage or in the name of the UK company. There's no annual charge because the property is not, or properties are not going to be used by the shareholders, directors, and closely connected family. So they're going to be used by the tenants exclusively. Net rental income will be taxed at 19% after deductibility of mortgage finance. When a property is sold for a gain and only on the net gains after costs, the net gains on a sale of a property is subject to 19% corporation tax. But unfortunately, if there is a death of the only owner, that's the only shareholder, inheritance tax will apply. So it's important that a will is made by the shareholders. If possible, mortgage finance is used to buy the property. And if the owners are less than 60 years old, sorry, the shareholders are less than 60 years old, life insurance to cover the worst case inheritance tax may not be that expensive, and quotes should at least be taken out, or quotes should be offered and made just to cover off that potential liability. So that's the benefit of using a UK company. If we could go to illustration 2, again, another buy-to-let type of property purchase. So we've covered buying property in individual names, private landlords using mortgage finance, wills, and life insurance. The UK company, often a default option because rental income can be, mortgage interest can be deducted in full and all costs from rental income. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is a slightly more sophisticated arrangement, especially if the buy-to-let real estate is going to exceed about £1 million with or without mortgage finance. You would get mortgage finance of 65% loan to purchase, possibly on an interest-only basis, possibly around about 3% because it's not a main residence, it's a buy-to-let investment. The property or properties should be exclusively let to third parties, not enjoyed by family and friends. However, we have here a two-tier structure, an offshore trust and company combination. There is a Hong Kong person here like Winnie who doesn't know whether she's going to enjoy the visa and come to live in the UK, but she has the option to come and relocate to the UK, perhaps later in life, or a career change and everything else like that. So that option is still available to her. Clearly, she's non-UK domiciled because she was born in Hong Kong. Her parents are Hong Kong based. She was educated in Hong Kong. And there's no doubt that Winnie is Hong Kong domiciled and not, like Stuart and myself, UK domiciled. So Winnie has a major advantage over Stuart and myself and UK subjects. Winnie settles a overseas trust, maybe not a Hong Kong trust because Winnie may be coming this way in later life or relocating, but it could be an Isle of Man trust. We have 8 trust licenses so around the world, so we've got plenty of choice. Winnie decides to appoint Sovereign Trust as the professional trustee, and the family of Winnie are the beneficiaries for succession, inheritance, estate planning, and a lot of other advantages. The trust isn't buying the property because if that was the case, rental income would be subject to tax at 45%. The trust is going to open and set up a BVI or Isle of Man company because banks like lending against those types of companies, especially if sovereign are the administrators. And the lending is usually about 65% loan to finance or loan to purchase. The company is going to buy one or more buy-to-let residential properties. And because of that structure, there's no tax on contributing funds into the trust and company, whether that's the entire purchase price or a deposit. There's no tax on obtaining a mortgage. The properties are readied for rental, structured for rental. So there's no annual charge because because the property is rented exclusively to third parties. Net rental income and gains from sales subject to tax at 19%. And there's no inheritance tax if the settlor and any of the beneficiaries die. So you're saving completely that 40% tax liability on death. No need for life insurance, potentially no need for a will, mortgage finance, optional, not hugely important unless you want it to deduct against net rental income. So that's why you would use that type of scenario, and for an investment purchase of plus 1 million to justify the sophistication and the extra cost, ladies and gentlemen. The next slide, Mandy, please, is a reference slide purely for your pack, your digestion, and for reading when you want it. But this slide, especially in the left-hand column, ladies and gentlemen, you've got top left-hand corner, main residence. Below that, you've got your buy-to-let residential portfolio. Below that, you've got your property development with the sole intention to sell property units. And the last one, UK property, UK commercial property. Don't mix them. Have a separate strategy for each asset class. You've got non-dom status on the left there, UK dom on the right, what to use, the costs, the purchase costs, the stamp duty, but the solutions for different asset classes there. And that's just purely for your reference. Next slide, please. And it's Winnie to speak. Winnie, you're on mute.
Yep, here. 多謝大家希望阿 Simon 頭先講嘅資料咧，都係幫到大家啦。大家仲係留喺呢個webinar 入邊嘅 ，thank you。我係 Winnie，我哋from香港 office 嘅。 咁其實我想簡單啲介紹下，譬如 Sovereign Group 其實而家係做緊啲乜嘢嘅，我哋 offerings 嘅。咁其實頭先我講 Trust 啊、UK 啊、Tax Advice 或者係一啲consultancy 嘅一啲嘅 service 咧，都係 under 我哋一啲叫做private client 嘅一啲嘅sectors 入邊。咁當然啦，我哋係 Trust Services、Trust Firm 嘅話，我哋都係幫人哋做一啲嘅family trust。咁其實喺另外一個 sector 咧，我哋都做一啲嘅 corporate clients 嘅 work 嘅。咁我哋嘅 target 嘅一啲嘅我哋嘅服務群組咧，就通常都係一啲初創企業啦，亦都係有一啲嘅 SME 啦、中小企啦，同埋一啲嘅 listcom， 即係一啲嘅上市公司。咁大家想象下一啲 corporate 嘅 client， 其實我哋有一啲需要啲咩服務咧？可能需要啲 accounting 啊、會計啊、一啲 payroll 發工資啦，或者係一啲report tax 啊嘅一啲嘅服務，我哋都做到嘅，或者係一啲 bank account opening 啊，我哋都可以係去 assist 你哋嘅。如果係一啲上市嘅服務嘅話咧，我哋都會做一啲嘅 PIPO trust， 係一啲上市之前嘅一啲嘅計劃，我哋都可以做到一啲。咁我諗其實服務就好多，但係我諗我呢度都講唔晒嘅話咧，希望大家可以有時間睇一睇我哋嘅website www.sovereigngroup.com。咁希望你可以知多少少關於我哋嘅服務啊。Mandy next slide 唔該。我就from香港啦 ，Simon 同阿 Stuart 就係from UK 嘅。咁其實我哋仲有唔同嘅 office 喺全球有23個。咁大家可以睇到我哋中國都有我哋 office 啦，有北京、上海啦。咁杜拜、南非，我哋香港啦。咁我哋有其他嘅 jurisdictions， 仲有係Gibraltar、Guernsey、IOM、Mauritius 呢啲都係一啲 offshore jurisdictions 咧。我哋都有我哋自己嘅員工嘅。我哋全球有475個員工。咁我哋香港 office 咧就大概有40個到50個左右啦。咁我哋嘅 office 喺 Kinwick Centre 喺中環嗰邊嘅。咁如果有需要嘅話咧，我哋都可以大家見個面睇下，了解多啲大家嘅。Next slide, please。頭先都講咗好多關於可能稅收啊，或者係一啲喺 UK 上邊嘅一啲嘅 regulations。咁可能我哋再提一提大家就係話，當我哋 take further step 嘅時候，我諗都要知道下當地嗰個稅制係點樣啦，而去計劃啦。計劃咗之後，一定係有啲 budget 同埋 time 嘅 constraint 嘅。咁我諗呢樣嘢都大家都要留意一下。咁最重要就係揾一個即係可靠嘅partner。係同你哋大家一齊 work with 咧，都好緊要嘅。唔該 ，next slide please。多謝各位。咁我哋再俾一次嘅 contact， 大家睇一睇。咁我哋有 UK office 啦，阿 Simon 啦，rural office 嘅就有阿 Stuart 啦，而我咧就喺香港呢邊嘅，我係 Winnie。希望今日嘅資訊可以幫到大家。next slide 唔該。Mandy， 好。
Thanks, Winnie。
我哋就係介紹咁多 ，thank you。Mandy， 我哋可以行 Q&A。
Yeah.
Can I just finish off in regard?
Sure.
I'll just finish off in regards to some one of the things that we have picked up from the previous webinar is that a lot of people who've acquired properties over here need help when they're complying with various tax returns and other regulatory issues over here. As Winnie stated in her presentation, I sit in the Wirral office, which is just bordering Liverpool. And one of the things we do is help people who are coming over here to invest or even to live and set up. So we can help you, assist you with any issues you may have in complying with UK tax or any other regulations related to your property or even to yourself, or even if you came to set up a business here. So please, though we haven't really touched on that, please feel free to contact us with any queries in that regard. We can either insist ourselves, obviously we have a broad network of accountants, lawyers and other professionals who can assist where required. So I just wanted to add that point in.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Stuart. Thank you, Simon and Winnie. Okay, let's come to Q&A questions. Anyone wants to ask questions, feel free to on your mic and you can actually ask it personally, or else you can actually type it in the comment box. We will try to answer one by one. So let's start the first one. Okay, during the 5-year stay, can applicants leave UK and come back, or have to be staying in UK until 5 years?
Yeah,
Yes, that's a good question. I was trying to answer that and I wasn't reading it completely right. And yes, you can come and go in your visa. There's no requirement to physically stay 5 years in exile from Hong Kong, because you can return to Hong Kong. You can enjoy business in Hong Kong. It's pretty relaxed and you're not forced to stay 365 days a year for the 5 years in order to get ILR. There is a classification of days in order to obtain ILR, indefinite leave to remain. That means permanent residency and therefore a right to apply for a passport after year 5. And I think you've got to. I'm not an immigration specialist, but I'm certain you must not be absent from the UK for 182 days in any 1 year. So if you really want to obtain indefinite leave to remain after 5 years, which gives you permanent rights of residency and all the benefits, social, wealth, education, and all the social security benefits, and as you should get those anyway by right, then you shouldn't be absent for more than 182 days in any 1 year. So make the UK your place of vital existence, your place of residence, but you don't have to be here 365 days, and nor should you be. So hopefully that's answered the question.
Just to add into that, if you have been applying for visas in the UK already, through other schemes that have those days, if you go use the B&O scheme, those days you've already applied, so living here to get those schemes can be then transferred over into the B&O passport scheme. So you don't just lose that time. They can be added in to the 5-year period stay requirements.
Okay. So another question, SDLT for the company owned are same or any different?
Right. The stamp duty is not an easy tax to understand, and I gave you the graduated rates, and Mandy's going to send you the presentation which will include obviously the stamp duty rates, which I'm looking at now. So on stamp duty rates on buy-to-let residential property investment, whether it's a company or an individual, will be roughly the same. The only way it changes stamp duty is if a Hong Kong national comes to live in the UK and they buy their main residence in the UK, because they make it their home, but that's their home, it's not to rent out, then you would not have the surcharges in place that I referenced earlier. So a buy-to-let property is by definition another property. It's a secondary property. It's a business. It's an investment property. You're going to rent that to Stuart and Mandy and Simon and that sort of thing, to third parties. So the surcharges will apply, whether it's an individual or a corporate purchase. So the answer is yes, they are the same for buy-to-let. And if you are buying a main residence for yourself because you're moving to Hong Kong, then the surcharges do not apply.
Okay. Anything to add, Stuart, on this?
No, sorry, no. I will leave SDLT and its complexity to Simon. He's far better qualified than I am, to be honest.
Okay, another question. We talk about when the UK company own the properties, but the Hong Kong resident shareholder, that means non-UK residents, pay no tax both in Hong Kong and UK on development payout. Would that be applicable?
That's a good question. Sounds, David answered that question. It sounds like it's coming from an accountant, barrister or solicitor there. or a tax professional. But yeah, good question.
We apologise if you're not any one of those, David.
Yeah, apologies. I'm not making any judgments, but very good question. And as I alluded to, if a UK company owns property and rents it out, you're not going to escape the corporation tax at 19% because the asset is here and you're generating UK sourced income. I think you understand that because that's not really your question. So corporation tax is paid on net rental profits, and then the UK company is able to distribute its dividend to its shareholders. And the UK, because of the UK landscape, which is applicable to UK DOMs and non-UK DOMs, there is no dividend withholding tax like there is in Ireland and a lot of other countries. So there's no double taxation. And if the dividend is paid to a non-UK resident, the non-UK resident doesn't suffer any UK dividend tax. You would if you're a UK resident like Stuart, myself, and if Winnie came to live in the UK, she would too. But dividend tax is less than income tax rates. And I suppose if the shareholder is a Hong Kong resident person, because the income has been derived from a non-Hong Kong source, and bearing in mind Hong Kong has this enviable taxation landscape where Hong Kong companies and individuals, resident individuals, are taxed on a source-based system on the basis that property income was non-Hong Kong sourced, that dividend should not be subject to Hong Kong taxation either. So very good observation, David, and there's the positive answer for you.
I think just to qualify that, just to say, I spent about 10 years living in Hong Kong, most of that working for Sovereign, but so quite a lot of experience dealing with Hong Kong. But even if you were a director of the UK company and managing and controlling it from Hong Kong, even then there should not be, because of the source-based tax system in Hong Kong, just to underline what Simon has just said, there should not be any tax to pay in Hong Kong on the receipt either by you personally or into any corporate or trust structure you may have in the territory.
Okay. So another question is, to enjoy the stamp duty holidays, and the deadline is actually by June 30th. So it's necessary to buy the completed projects, or they can actually go for those uncompleted projects. Will they be able to meet the deadline?
That's a very good question, this, because so good. I don't know the exact answer, but if you've just reserved the property and you haven't signed a contract, then that's not a completed project. Yeah. If you have exchange contracts, and obviously if you've completed the stamp duty holidays apply, if you've exchanged contracts and you're not just holding the development, it is likely that the stamp duty reduction will apply. But we're going to have to come back offline on that one, because I'm not going to pretend to answer a question I'm not totally sure of. If it's a reservation deposit, no, that's a commitment, but it's not a completion, and it's not a contract exchange. So let me come back to Mandy on that one, if you will, unless Stuart, you know the answer.
No, I'm with you. My understanding, and I qualify it the same way as Simon does. This is my understanding: is that if you do effectively complete the contract pre to the 30th without a formal exchange, then you should be within the holiday. Before June the 30th, you should be able to be subject to current rates. That is my understanding, even if you actually haven't formally exchanged. But we will double check that with a stamp duty expert, because obviously there will be a lot of this going on right now, and people trying to force through the sale, and people trying to find loopholes so they don't actually have to basically hand over the cash straight away. But we'll have to qualify that for you.
It's always cautious when you talk about buying a properties when meeting the deadline. So it's always good that you check with the professionals to understand the whole process to make sure that you actually meet the deadline. All right. So in this part, Juwai.AsiaHK or our consultant will be able to advise you. We will find out the best answer for you as well. Okay, I guess there's another question was talking about, I guess this question is like always been a lot of people will keep asking it. So a lot of people is a little bit confused when talk about buying a residence under personal name or the company name. So I guess it all depends on the amount that you spend, right? As what Simon have actually highlighted during one of the presentations, like maybe you have to like re-summarize the whole thing, that which is the better options for individuals to buy residential properties.
Yeah, if you're going to buy a property that you're going to enjoy, use, the family are going to use, then you don't use a company, because if you use a company for your main residence or partial occupation, from £500,000, you are going to pay annual tax on envelope dwellings every year. And it goes up exponentially. After 2 million, it goes up to £24,000. So don't buy a main residence in the name of a company. Buy it in your own name or joint names. And if it's going to be rather a valuable property, at least 1 million, and you're not 21-year-old Premier Footballship players, then buy it in an offshore trust, because that basically eliminates the inheritance tax. So never buy a main or secondary residence that you're going to enjoy for a company. One of the questions here: how long would one need to stay before qualifying as a resident? Well, that's a sort of based on a law of intention. If you still consider Hong Kong as your place of vital interests, and you haven't really left your home in Hong Kong insofar as it's still there as your main residence to enjoy, then the surcharges will apply. If you are a mobile person, a mobile executive, and spending time between Hong Kong and the UK and other countries and travel, but you regard the UK as your or your UK home as your main residence, because you're mobile, you're a mobile executive, you're traveling around the world, meeting your business obligations, and you can safely say that 27 Burdham Close, where I am at the moment, my house and my residence in Kent, if that's where you frequent to and your intention is that that is your home, and you've basically been here for a minimum of 3 months making it your home, then you can actually lay claim to say, well, my main residence is now the UK and my Hong Kong residence is my secondary residence. It's a complicated area of law. It's based on a bit of honesty in terms of where your heart, intention, place of vital interests are. And don't forget, you can come to the UK as a Hong Kong citizen, or Mandy as a Malaysian citizen, become UK resident, even stay here for 7 years with your overseas income, your overseas gains, your overseas assets not exposed to any taxation at all. And that's because you're non-UK domiciled UK resident. So your rest of world business, your rest of world earnings, your rest of world gains, dividends, overseas property rental, commissions, house sales, business sales, especially if the income and gains are not remitted to the UK, is not taxed in the UK, and you can still make your property in the UK your main residence, and you can still make the UK your tax and habitual residence. So those are the benefits that are there for you, and we'll assess your situation on a case-by-case basis. One of our last slides, ladies and gentlemen, actually says, I think it's the contact slide that Winnie was referring to or made reference to earlier. It's contact Juwai and Sovereign for an immediate consultation, completely without obligation and cost. So case by case, you're very welcome to do that.
All right, thank you very much. Is there any more questions before we end our webinar?
I think James has just come in with the question about the do I the over 800,000 pound inquiry? Again, I assume that's James asking that secondary question.
Yeah.
I mean, you put it very well at the end there, James. It depends, but I would, in regards to the acquisition of the property, use whatever money you require, but obviously we'd always suggest where you can get somebody else to actually finance it, get a mortgage, and then for the remainder of the money, I would suggest not bringing the money in physically into the UK. You leave it outside the UK and you draw down on it when required, and leave it, and basically you have a segregated account with your bank. You have a capital and income account, and you can then draw down on the capital free of tax going forward. I won't get into the complexities of how that all works, but I would always suggest, as a non-domicile taking up residency in the UK, to leave as much money outside the UK and maybe even wrap it up in a trust just in case anything happens to you. But I would. But if you said no, I don't care, I want to bring all that cash into the UK, there would be no tax on it being deposited in the UK. Obviously, once it starts earning, if it's earning interest or any return on that money, then it would be subject to tax. And that's why we suggest you leave it outside the UK going forward.
Right, just thanks, Stuart. On that, it was Winnie and myself that had to deal with a person that's not on this webinar, but a Hong Kong citizen. I won't mention name. Let's mention Gary. That's my brother-in-law, actually. Gary. Let's call him Gary. So Gary wants to come to the UK, not now, but in 2 years' time, and he has rather a lot of money. Could be £800,000. I know it's a bit more. So what we're saying to Gary is, look at your £800,000. This is in the case of James, but this is what I said to Gary. That was yesterday with Winnie, and work out when you're coming to the UK. So if it's this fiscal year, James, that's not a problem. But then you've got to look at your overseas bank accounts as they were on the 31st of March, because the 31st of March this year was the last month of the UK fiscal year. In April the 6th was the start of the next fiscal year, which was 2 weeks ago. Most people, Stuart and I, get our bank statements on the 31st of March. That's the last month of the financial year. 31st of March was last year. 6th of April is this year. So, James, what you've got to try and do is look at your £800,000 that perhaps is with Standard Chartered in Hong Kong, for example, and I would open a brand new Standard Chartered Hong Kong bank account, just to be on the safe side. Take the proceeds of your Standard Chartered normal accounts up to the 31st of March, not after 31st of March. So up to the 31st of March, you may have much more than £800,000, but if you want to bring £800,000 in, you transfer £800,000 from the old account into the new overseas Standard Chartered account opened up in the name of James. I won't pronounce your surname, might get it wrong. And it's perhaps a breach of confidentiality, just James. And then because that £800,000 belonged to the last financial year, which you were not resident of the UK, the £800,000 moves to the new account at Standard Chartered Hong Kong. And that is because it can be clearly defined as clean savings capital. And when you decide to bring in, as Stuart said, little bits of that £800,000 into the UK, or all of it, please note that remittances of clean capital from an overseas source to the UK is taxed at 0. But if you made the mistake of that £800,000, which was remitted into the UK, but which also had income and gains for this tax year, so that's post UK arrival income and gains, you could run the risk of that remittance being subject to income tax in the UK, because there would be £100 of income and gains and £800,000 of capital, but it's all mixed together. And HMRC would try and make an example of that if they wanted to raise some questions, and you can never rule that out. So open a new account, call it savings, put the money into the new account from accumulations that would have been made 31st of March or before, then it's capital. You bring that into the UK, you're taxed at zero. It's a very long way of answering that. You wouldn't want to see my email on it, which went onto a page, but that's how you do it. And if you want to get Stuart and my written advice, taking out the client's name that Winnie and I dealt with yesterday, or versions of that, you're very, very welcome. That's how you remit overseas capital into the UK, and you're not therefore taxed on your worldwide income. It's taxed at zero. Thank you for your question, James.
Thank you very much, Simon and Stuart. I guess there's no more questions, and we shall end our webinar. For those that was interested to get the PPT, as what Simon mentioned just now, please register your name, contact number, and email address with the respective consultants, or you can actually drop your details in the message box or the chat box. We will actually send it to you. Right? Remember that if you want the PPT, please register yourself. All right. So on behalf of Juwai.AsiaHK, I would like to thank everyone for taking your time to join us this afternoon, and I hope today's sessions will benefit you and your investments together with the tax planning. Once again, thanks to our three wonderful speakers for such an insightful sharing. If you have further questions, please feel free to contact us. We are here for you. Okay, do stay tuned for upcoming offline events and webinars. We'll do it every month, and we are here to educate so that you can actually invest wisely. I'm Mandy Kat. Hope you have a great weekend. Take care. Stay safe. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Have a good
即係大
day.
家收睇 Juwai.AsiaHK 嘅 UK webinar。咁啱頭先咧，我哋嘉賓提過咧，可以send 俾大家個 report 啦，個 PPT 啦。咁其實咧，大家而家可以喺而家嗰個 chat box 嗰度啦，可以登記你個留低你個名啦，你嘅contact 同埋你嘅 email。咁我哋稍後時間咧亦都會 send 翻俾大家嘅。咁另外，如果咧你係就到我哋嘅 agent 邀請嘅話，亦都可以聯絡翻我哋嘅 agent。咁我哋亦都可以之後稍後時間亦都會 send 翻俾大家嘅。多謝晒。